HannaTalk. What is up, Star Wars fans? Simon here. Welcome to HannaTalk. Hope you are all fantastic. Today I am here with a very special guest. Now, he is a voice actor who is best known to fans in the Star Wars universe from narrating and voicing characters in the Star Wars audiobooks, particularly Grand Admiral Thrawn, to even being part of the Star Wars franchise in Star Wars Visions, but he's also played across in shows such as Yu-Gi-Oh!, One Piece, Shaman King, Transformers, Pokemon, and so much more. Please welcome back to HannaTalk, the amazing Marc Thompson.
Hey, how are ya? Thanks for having me.
Absolutely no problem at all, and it's an absolute honor to have you back on here, Marc. How are you?
Pretty good. I'm kind of chugging along and enjoying my 2023 so far, so...
As is the rest of us, considering what we've all been through, which actually goes in my yeah, exactly, which actually goes in my first question. With what's been happening with the virus and the pandemic for the last few years, how have you been keeping things up, especially on the acting side of things?
Well, it was definitely an adventure. I think there was a period of time where it was really scary because it just felt like nobody was working and it didn't seem like there was an answer of how we could work. And then kind of the pressure was on to kind of figure out how to record at home. And at the time, I was, my older son has since moved out, but I was living in a 2-bedroom apartment with 2 boys and 2 dogs, and it was very challenging to get it to be quiet in here. And I had to kind of go to Home Depot and get some PVC pipe and some blankets, and I was making soundproof forts around my desk and trying to find different ways to be able to record from home. And eventually that became kind of the way things are happening. Like I have a couple jobs next week that will be recording from home, so it was a weird adaptation, but it seems to have worked. And now, there's some studios that have opened back up and are having people come in, and I did a multicast audiobook project today in studio. But sometimes we're still working from home even now, so it was a bit of a learning curve, and I had to kind of learn the engineering side of things. And I'm much better at the performing side than the engineering side, but I can kind of do a good enough job, I guess you would say.
That's fantastic, and that's definitely true in that regard. In that a lot of voice actors have had their own home studio, but even before the pandemic, I think even came into play. A lot of them would have their own home studios, like long before the pandemic and the lockdown came along. So I guess you could say they were being prepared for what was to come in that sense.
Yeah.
But no, that's
Yeah,
fantastic.
it's just challenging in New York because there's not a lot of space, so I had to make do.
I can imagine that. But no, that's wonderful though. Now, I'd just like to say a huge congratulations on Star Wars Visions, both Volume 1 and Volume 2.
I think I was only in Volume 1. I didn't do anything for Volume 2.
That's okay then. Well, having been part of the Star Wars universe for such a long time, how did it feel particularly to be part of Star Wars Visions Volume 1, especially with them exploring into or going into the world of anime, having been inspired by having had the Japanese influences since the original trilogy?
It was amazing. Like, I was super excited because I've kind of, I got my start in animation, and I got my start specifically in kind of Japanese animation, dubbing into English. So it was kind of a wild full circle moment to have these two things that I've had my foot in kind of mesh together and meld together. So that was very exciting, and I really loved being a part of it. And I had been wanting to kind of, try to get into some Star Wars animation for a long time. And a friend of mine who was actually we were on Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles together, and he owns a studio called NYAV Post. And he knew what a big Star Wars fan I was, and he was asked to kind of help dub these, and he threw my name into the hat, and they said, yeah, sure. So it was a dream come true, and I'd love to do more of it, and I was very, very excited to get to do that. And the animation style for I was in a few episodes, but the main character I was in was the Tatooine Rhapsody one. And to me, it felt very reminiscent of the style of animation that Pokemon has. So it was kind of fun to be
Absolutely, and especially knowing a lot of the different animation studios that were involved in Volume 1 in particular, having worked on such really big anime productions at that time is truly remarkable actually, and especially for us Star Wars fans. We were wondering for such a long time when they would get to do an anime-inspired Star Wars series, and we ended up getting that in Star Wars Visions Volume 1, even though Volume 2 got into different animation styles altogether, which I was really surprised about. But I understand, of course, that's them saying, you know what? We've obviously got the traditional animation style that Dave Filoni was known for doing when he did Clone Wars Rebels with George Lucas and all that kind of stuff. And this is them dipping their toe into the other animation styles that are out there, especially to a lot of studios that are not really being heard enough in that regard, because animation is like, it's an amazing industry and everything, but it feels like it's sort of has that stigma attached to it where it's like it's just purely for kids. It's like it's not, people don't see it in like the eyes for adults or anything.
Yeah, and I feel like what they're doing with the Visions episodes is breaking that concept open, and just kind of showing what a beautiful art form it is in and of itself, and kind of, exposing people that maybe might not otherwise be exposed to some of these forms of animation to it. And I think it's really exciting, and like just some of the visual aesthetic, but just also some of the storytelling ideas, and seeing kind of some of these different fresh takes on Star Wars has been really exciting and refreshing, and I hope they continue with it for a while, because I loved both volumes. I thought they did an amazing job.
Absolutely. Based on the stuff that I saw from both Visions Volume 1 and Volume 2, they really did an amazing job with it. And this is where the path of Star Wars is going forward in most of the TV side of things, both animation and live action. And now they're slowly starting to dip their toe back in the film universe with a number of the films they've announced in Star Wars Celebration just this year.
Yeah,
So,
and I love all three all three of the ones they announced. I mean, I'm a sucker for anything Star Wars, but like those three ideas, I'm very, very excited about. Like, I would love to see kind of these prehistoric Jedi and the discovery of the Force, and I think James Mangold described it as wanting it to be almost like a Bible epic, which was like really exciting for me. And then, yeah, I definitely want to see Rey rebuild the Order, so I'd be very, very into that. And then just to see Dave Filoni have his own feature-length film with just how skilled he is at storytelling, and all the things, all the shows seemingly to build towards that. And it looks like Thrawn will have a huge part of it. So I'm just over the moon, and I want all of those movies to have huge success and get all the love they deserve, because I just the concepts alone are going to be great.
absolutely. And I think for a lot of people, especially like, it goes back to the idea of what you want Star Wars to look and feel like in that regard. Because I think, regardless of how people feel about the sequels, in particular, the sequel trilogy, which has sort of had the same reaction to when the prequels were first announced, I feel like with the new stuff that they're going to be releasing, especially with the sequels, it's kind of like when Dave Filoni and George Lucas both did Clone Wars and Rebels. It expanded on the original trilogy and the prequels in particular, making them so much better as movies. So you'd look back on them and go like, you know what? They actually, now having watched all this extra bit of stuff, it actually makes them so much better as movies. So
Oh yeah,
I'm expecting it for the sequel trilogy as well. And
yeah.
yeah, I'm excited for that. Now obviously because we've just had The Mandalorian season 3, we've obviously got Bad Batch season 2, and we're going to be getting ready for the rest of the Star Wars shows coming out later this year. What would you personally want to explore and see in the Star Wars universe, not just from an acting perspective, but really from a fan perspective?
Oh man. Well, I don't know how likely it is, but it would really be fun to kind of see what Han, Luke, and Leia were doing after Return of the Jedi. I mean, obviously the novels explore that in great detail, and there were some really great stories in there. And that time has probably passed. I think they are maybe going to avoid that. But selfishly, I would love to kind of see that trio, and how they handle Thrawn and all this stuff in live action and things like that. But I always crave the Jedi stuff. Like that's the stuff that I'm most excited for. So I'm really looking forward forward to Ahsoka because I feel like that's gonna delve deeper into that stuff. But I would love, like, you know, an exploration on, like, because I've heard Dave Filoni talk a lot about how the prequel era Jedi perhaps, you know, drifted from what their original mission was and got too involved in the government, too involved in the war, and I would love to kind of hear, you know, and maybe James Mangold will cover this in his film, but I would love to kind of hear what, you know, the Jedi were in their truest and purest form, and I would love, like, some clarification on attachment and, you know, and how the Jedi view that, because, like, obviously I understand to some degree why attachment would be wrong, and you don't want to get too attached to things, but the idea of, like, being, you know, forbidding perhaps deep friendships or romantic relationships, I wonder if that's really what is originally intended, or what you know, is it possible to have those relationships and not have unhealthy attachments, and how would the Jedi think about that? And you know, I think Dave Filoni's kind of playing, and Jon Favreau's playing with that a little bit in The Mandalorian as well, because they kind of show that the Mandalorian's creed is all about loyalty and all about, in some ways, attachment, and you see kind of some of the benefits of that, and so it's interesting to have those two philosophies maybe play off of each other, and, you know, maybe Grogu would be, you know, a middle ground, or perhaps as he develops, maybe he'll take the best of both of those philosophies moving forward and find a way to integrate them, or, you know, so I don't know, this kind of rambling now, but you know, a lot of cool things I'd love to see.
No, that's absolutely fantastic, and I think that's definitely true about what they explored, particularly with the Mandalorian series, and especially based on the comments that we've had from previous Star Wars actors, including Mark Hamill, where we got asked about, because he did return for Luke Skywalker in the Mandalorian series, and the Book of Boba Fett in particular, where he spoke about that he's unsure if they want to go back to Luke's stories at this point, but he wouldn't be against the idea, though, especially recasting, like, Luke Skywalker with a much younger actor, particularly Sebastian Stan.
Oh, would love that.
That would be absolutely amazing. And just my question out there to the listeners, let me know in the comments below, what would you personally want to see in the Star Wars universe going forward, either in the live-action universe or the animation universe, and leave a like or a comment if you really want to see Marc Thompson make a Stan Lee cameo in the live-action Star Wars universe. That would be amazing.
Oh, I would love that, yeah. That would be a dream come true.
That would be absolutely fantastic. So hopefully Dave Filoni, Jon Favreau, any of the Star Wars people, if you're listening to this interview, once it's up, let's try to make it happen, because that would be amazing. Now, going across into the anime side of things, as we were talking just a little bit about before, now, typically, as people would know, that anime is based on manga. Have you ever read the manga for any particular anime that you've starred in or personally worked on?
I found some Kinnikuman manga, because I was on a show called Ultimate Muscle, and I don't know if they had this in Australia or not, but in the United States, it was they had these little pink figures that were kind of like wrestlers, and I never knew that it was attached to a manga, so I had the figures growing up, but then when I did the show, I was like, oh wow, there's a whole history here, and so I just out of curiosity, I found one of those and read that a little bit, but other than that, no, I think I may have picked up my sons were really into Attack on Titan, so I got a volume of that and for one of my sons, and kind of looked through that at one point. So I love that style of art. I just never really delved deeper into it.
That's fantastic. And that sort of reminds me a little bit of these couple of interviews that I had with Aaron Roberts and Amber Lee Connors, who many people remember from a whole range of anime productions, who are huge geeks in real life themselves, that they actually, when they first started working on a couple of the anime they worked on, they actually read the manga before they even started working on that series, because they were such huge fans of those productions that it influenced their performances, because they would have an idea for what was happening in the story. Whereas on the other side of that, you have actors like Joshua Seth, who many people remember from the Digimon universe, who I remembered this interview I did with him where he spoke about this advice he got from one mentor of his who said to him, "Don't read ahead, just go in there completely surprised."
Okay. Yeah, I could see the benefit of that, because then, then you're just playing what the character knows in that moment. Like you're not, you're kind of focused on what that character's experience is up to that point, which is much more true to how we experience life. So
Absolutely.
I can see how that would be beneficial.
Absolutely, definitely. Now, going across into the Pokemon side of things, now this year obviously have been the final season to feature Ash as the main character, and especially a couple of years back, we had the 25-year anniversary of the franchise. How did it feel? What was it like celebrating 25 years of a franchise as big as Pokemon?
It was pretty wild. Like I've been telling people lately, like, I've been very, very blessed, because I've been able to work on a lot of different projects, and a lot of them were projects that I grew up with. Like, so for, I got to do Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and Transformers and Star Wars, but Pokemon was interesting because I was working on it while it was kind of starting to become popular and hit its stride, and so I really was kind of oblivious to how popular it was, or how people liked it or gravitated towards it. And it's only recently I've actually started going to some animation conventions, that I've started to realize, like, how important Pokemon is to people, and how much people love the video games and the cards and the cartoons. And so then it's kind of been really gratifying to, people will come up and say, "Oh, you're such a big part of my childhood," or, "Oh, I love this character." And I met someone who has, like, one of the largest Gengar collections in the world, and is going to get certified by the Guinness Book of World Records. And it's just really, it's really interesting just to see all that. It's kind of a huge honor, like, that I didn't realize I was a part of until much more recently. So having the 25th anniversary and all the hype around it has kind of opened my eyes to kind of what I'm a part of. It was like, oh wow, this is really cool. So it was a delayed reaction.
But no, that's absolutely fantastic. No, and that's definitely true. And I will go on record to say that I feel like the new actors in the Pokemon series, ever since, like, 4Kids unfortunately had lost the rights to Pokemon around that time, they've all done a fantastic job in the series. There's no question about it. And I will go on record to say that I love both of them for completely different reasons, but obviously Veronica Taylor, Eric Stewart, Rachel Lillies, you and yourself, all the actors from the original series, you will forever remain important to the legacy that you started with Pokemon. So,
oh, thank you.
Yeah. But as I said, I love both of them for completely different reasons. So yeah, don't just take my word for it. Now, speaking about, of course, with 4Kids versions. Now, we obviously had the One Piece series, as we talked about in the last time we spoke, about the 4Kids version, which you starred in. But we also have the Funimation version, which came after 4Kids. Did you ever watch the Funimation version of the series, or meet any of the actors from the Funimation version?
I've not watched it, and I think I may have met recently at a con someone who did something for the Funimation One Piece, but I'm totally blanking on who they were and which character they did. But it was a very brief kind of passing in the hallway type thing. So, but I've not I've not checked that out. I probably should. But
No,
yeah.
no, that's fantastic though. I definitely feel like, of course, and I actually spoke about this before with, I think it was Veronica Taylor a couple of years back, before she came to Supernova just this year, which I attended, of course, which was absolutely fantastic, and where I think she spoke about where the fact with 4Kids, when a lot of anime productions at that time were under 4Kids at that time, I understand, of course, that they had to edit and censor a whole bunch of stuff in order to bring it down to a younger demographic. Whereas on the other side of that equation, you've also got companies, for example, like Viz Media, Funimation, all those types of companies that are bringing it around to a more general audience, especially to more adult viewers as well. So obviously, if 4Kids had stayed, if One Piece had stayed under 4Kids at the time, trying to adapt the entirety of the manga they would have lost a whole bunch of stuff or censor out a whole bunch of stuff in the process that would have been important to the story going forward, especially knowing how long One Piece has lasted for. Probably about as long as Pokemon, I think.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, and that's kind of an angle of that that I'm kind of learning from the fans as time has gone on, and and I think sometimes the Four Kids production gets a little trashed on because of that and hated on a little bit, and as if like the Four Kids as a company was the one saying we don't care about this storyline, or we don't care about being true to the original source material, where instead it really was that it was going to be on broadcast television for kids market, and there were certain rules that had to be followed if you were going to broadcast it in that way. So it's a little bit of a bummer that sometimes there's maybe some animosity because of that, instead of maybe understanding what the nature of that particular deal was, or because I think we were able to still have fun with it, and make the best with that kind of hand that you were dealt, and those restrictions you had to deal with. So but yeah, I mean I think Erica's super talented, and it was a fun show to do, and so it was, but it's always a little bit of a bummer when you hear people feel like that version wasn't good because of that, or so.
Absolutely.
But I understand if you were a fan of the original source, why that would bother you. I understand that, but it's always like, ah, man.
But no, I will go on the record to say that I felt the Four Kids version, as a series just by itself, looking across the board, all the actors across the board did a really great job in the Four Kids version. It was obviously the censoring and the editing, and I think also the direction they gave to certain performances that sort of held them back in terms of like that sort of aspect. And I feel like the Funimation version of One Piece was the version that I think was meant to be for the Four Kids version. But here's to hoping that, but we've had several, I think, of the Four Kids actors be part of the Funimation version. So, and because we're now getting into the final saga of the One Piece series, now with the creator speaking a little bit more about it and saying, yep, we're into the final arc of the series at this point, here's to hoping that most of the actors from that original series will come back in the Funimation version, because that would be amazing.
That'd be great.
Absolutely.
Is that when does Don Krieg come in? Did I miss my opportunity already?
I think they're about probably 10 years past that series,
Okay,
but unless they decide to do a spin-off series, here's to hoping, because that would be amazing. Now, speaking about, of course, with other series, you also starred in the Shaman King series, both in the original and the reboot series. What was it like being part of the Shaman King series, especially coming back into the reboot series?
Well, so it was really interesting because that one I had a lot of fun doing the original. Tony Salerno directed me in that one, and he did an awesome job kind of guiding the production, and I remember really liking the animation style and just kind of the action adventure aspect of it, so it was super fun. But then when it came time to do the reboot, I guess there was a lot of like NDAs, and they were trying to keep it very, very secret. So my agent called me and said, "Hey, there's a dub, and it's called Casper. Do you want to be a part of Casper?" And I was like, "Sure, why not?" And but Casper was like a code name. So like right up until the day of the session, I thought I was doing like maybe Casper the Friendly Ghost, and I thought it was like this kid show. And so then all of a sudden, like and typically when you're doing dubbing, they don't send you the script ahead of time. You're kind of you're getting the lines on the day of the recording session, and you're trying to match it to the lip flap. So when they pop it up on the screen, I'm like, wait, I know what this is Shaman King. Like I recognize this. And then they were like, yeah, you're reprising your character. And I was like, oh, well, I wish somebody would have told me. I could research the character. And he's like, oh yeah, well, we'll find some old clips and we'll play for you. But it was like, I didn't realize I was on it until I was literally in the booth. I was like, oh, they're rebooting Shaman King. This is weird. So. But then it's been fun. It's been really fun to kind of revisit it and go back to it. So.
That's fantastic. No, that's absolutely wonderful. Now, obviously, we've been getting a whole bunch of reboots of not just anime, but also potential other shows over the last 20 or 30 years for that matter. What's been your opinion on not just anime, but a lot of these classic shows being rebooted?
I have a mixed opinion. Like, I think there's a part of me that totally buys into the nostalgia of it all, and loves, kind of being reminded of the original one, and kind of, like, I'm a big Star Trek fan, and seeing, a lot of these Star Trek shows coming out, and like, even when I've done like Ninja Turtles or Transformers, like, there's a part of me that's like super into the fact that we're paying homage to this thing that was so important to me growing up. But then, I think if on the other side of that coin, or maybe to balance it out, if everything becomes a reboot, then eventually we're going to run out of things to reboot. And like, it's important that people are blazing new trails and coming up with new, concepts. And that is still happening. Like, there are still new projects coming about, and new kind of shows coming out. And so I don't think we should go to one extreme or the other. I don't think we should say no more reboots, but I also think that we should maybe look to new ideas, or kind of fresh ideas, and try to kind of create new things, but which is a bigger risk, though. So you understand why, from the creator standpoint or the producer standpoint, it's a safer bet to kind of reboot something that already has a built-in audience. So like, it makes a lot of sense why you would do that. But I think, it's if you could create something new, that could lead to a whole new, intellectual property that could really mean a lot to people. And, so I think we should try to find ways to do both, or.
I think that's a great attitude to have in that regard, especially because of like, I mean, obviously reboots can go, as you said, can go one direction or the other in this case, where the reboot could possibly surpass the original, maybe even better than the original. But on the other side of that equation, it could be a total disaster if it's not handled properly in that regard. I feel like personally, like, best example I can give to you on that is probably with Fullmetal Alchemist, with the original series versus Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood, or with Fruits Basket with the original series versus the one back in 2019, which was much more accurate to the original story, in that the original series was much more of a comedy-based series, even though Fruits Basket as a series is way darker, way more serious. It still has its comedic moments, but I honestly felt like when I watched the reboot, for example, I felt the reboot was much better than the original, in the same way the Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood was much better than the original Fullmetal Alchemist series. And I feel like with Shaman King, it basically basically with the reboot series, it was trying to be way more accurate to the original story in that regard, because in the original series, it was under 4 kids at that time, so they had to censor out a whole bunch of the stuff to bring it down to a younger audience. Even though, and I've remembered seeing panels from the manga itself, I was like, wow, this is way more crazier than I expected.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting because sometimes with reboots that can happen where, in hindsight you can see what really worked in the original, and then maybe make some adjustments for things that didn't work so well in the original, and then you can like elevate it, like you said, or kind of, like, I always felt that like the 2003 version of Ninja Turtles, I really liked that show because, I think it was trying to be closer to the spirit of the comic books, than perhaps the 80s cartoon that was like really heavy on the comedy, which comedy's awesome, and I love comedy. But it was an interesting, evolution, I guess, and I felt that way when I watched the Battlestar Galactica series several years ago on Sci-Fi. Like, the reboot of the Battlestar Galactica series was so different from the original, it almost didn't feel like a reboot, but it felt like, I really enjoyed that one a lot, and it kind of, I don't know if everyone would agree with that, but I thought that one was like maybe superior to the original, but maybe it was trying to do something much different than what the original was trying to do. So, but
No,
so perhaps
that's
that's
no,
another
that's a great attitude to have about that. That's fantastic, and it of course reminds me a little bit on. There was reports going about of them doing a reboot of the one of the other series that you started in, which was Daria, which
Yes.
yes, I heard about that. That was going around at the moment.
Yeah,
What's
yeah.
how do you personally feel about that? And let me know in the comments below, the listeners out there. Do you want Marc Thompson to come back in the Daria reboot series? That would be absolutely fantastic.
Marc Thompson wants to come back in the reboot series. Yeah, I tried to when that first got tweeted about or whatever. I tried to reply in the comments like, hey, I'm available. I would love to. So
Well, if
yeah, I mean, I think that show was way ahead of its time and was brilliant. That was my first ever voiceover job, and I really love that show, and I think that I feel like the times we're living in are ripe for someone like Daria in their perspective. I think the reboot was maybe proposing following Jodie, maybe, or a different character. So I'm not sure if it would be Daria as an adult or someone else. But that sensibility, I think, was really interesting and kind of really thought provoking and deep and I would love to see that perspective addressing some of the things that the world's going through right now. I think it'd be really cool.
Absolutely, and I feel like at this point, with where the world has been going post COVID and everything, like we're sort of going through a bit on the rebound, so to speak, and trying to recover like post COVID after everything we've been through for the last 3 years of our lives. It's kind of like we need stuff like that to kind of help us through those moments and kind of alleviate the situation in a way. Because obviously, and I was speaking about this beforehand, where obviously the pandemic and the lockdown came across. We've had moments of like political correctness and cancel culture coming into the equation. It's been there for a long time, but it was really the time of COVID that really brought all of that out into the forefront in that sense. And I feel like we need a series like Daria to kind of bring levity to those kind of situations, basically, or to say, all right, your political correctness and all that kind of stuff, let's dumb it down to a point where it's like, or just basically shut up.
Right. Yeah.
Well, that's just my opinion anyway, but yeah.
Yeah.
But no, that's fantastic though. Now, you also started in the series Yugioh, particularly the latest Yugioh series, which was Yugioh 7,
Yeah.
sorry. What was it like? What's it been like being part of the Yu-Gi-Oh franchise for such a long time?
Yeah, I mean, that's another one where I didn't totally understand the popularity or the reach of it until much later, and so I feel like I've started to appreciate it even more lately, and kind of having some time pass that I've kind of been able to see some of the fans and their response to it. And I was at a convention recently, and someone had cosplayed as Duke Devlin, and I was like, oh, no way, so that's been pretty cool. And also, a buddy of mine recently got me into the old Star Wars trading card game.
Oh, wow.
And I was always intimidated by trading card games, and doing Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh, so much of it was the exposition about this card does this, and but playing the Star Wars trading card game kind of gave me an appreciation for trading card games in general, and I'm starting to see the appeal of them now, and I'm like, oh, this is why people like this stuff. Like, this is really cool, So yeah, I feel like it's a huge honor, and I feel like I'm appreciating it more as time goes on.
No, that's absolutely fantastic. And I will go on record to say that obviously during the lockdown of the pandemic, myself being such a huge fan of a lot of different properties, I've got basically the original dual disc from back during the original Yu-Gi-Oh series that I purchased during the lockdown, including a couple of decks of Yu-Gi-Oh cards with, I think, the 3 Egyptian God cards in that pack. So that proves what a big Yu-Gi-Oh fan I am to this day forward. So
That's so cool.
it is so fantastic. Now obviously we've had the Yu-Gi-Oh! Dark Side of Dimensions movie, which was the movie set after the events of the original series, but if there was a potential for a revival series of like the actual original series set after the Dark Side Dimensions movie, would we hope to see you come back in something like that?
Oh man, I would love to. Like in a heartbeat. I miss working with Eric and Dan and Greg and Wayne and all those guys, and I would really love a chance to do something like that again. And even with that movie, Duke was like, I think he was like a waiter at a cafe or something. And I was like, come on, the guy had his own like, game company. What happened? So like I would have loved a little bit more to do in that one, but if they ever did anything like that, I would be there in a heartbeat. I would love to do it.
Absolutely, and I think you could sort of see that him working as a butler is just like, it's just me doing it as a part-time job, just because they're meant to be high schoolers at this point, basically. Yes. So, yeah, if there was the potential for a revival, if they could manage to do a revival series of a whole bunch of shows, anything is possible at this point. That would be so fantastic. Now, obviously, looking back at your entire career, what's like one other anime or cartoon series that you've worked on would you want to see a revival series of?
Oh wow, that's a good question. I think the first one that's popping in my mind is Ultimate Muscle, which I think there might be a revival series happening actually. Now that I'm saying this out loud, but I had so much fun on that show. That was kind of the first show where I got to do like the lead role, and it was just the humor was so over the top and crazy and just ridiculous, and I would love to kind of revisit that and be goofy and crazy again. That was a lot of fun to do.
Absolutely, that's fantastic. Especially looking back at the original Ultimate Muscle series, it was a fantastic series, and you and the actors across the board did a fantastic job on that show. It was so fantastic.
Oh, thank you.
That's no problem at all. And now the other types of looking across at one of the series that you were part of, you've also been part of the Transformers universe, particularly Transformers Cyberverse as the voice of Megatron. What was it like being part of the Transformers universe?
That was really exciting. Like that was another one where like that and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and then I did a show called G.I. Joe Sigma 6. Like those were the cartoons I watched growing up. So the chance to be Megatron was like really, really exciting. The actual recording of it was unusual because they had written all of the scripts way ahead of time. So we would go in and we would sometimes knock out 6 or 8 episodes a session. So I was done with my part of that series in what felt like a few weeks, and then they animated to us. So it wasn't until the show came out, and then I was like, oh wow, the animation's like really awesome, and it kind of like it seemed to pay a lot of homage to the 80s style, and the look of it was somewhat similar to the 80s versions of those characters, and so I would have loved for that one to continue more and kind of be drawn out a little bit more, but it was kind of like in and out, and it was all over. I was like, wait, we're done, but it was great, and I really liked that show. I liked how it turned out.
No, that's fantastic. That's absolutely wonderful. And especially now we've been getting the news on Transformers Rise of the Beast, which has just dropped this year, and the potential for a Transformers G.I. Joe crossover as part of the live-action universe. Let me know in the comments below, to all the listeners out there, what do you want to see them do in the live-action universe with Transformers and G.I. Joe going forward? And leave a like or a comment if you really want to see Marc Thompson make a Stanley cameo in the G.I. Joe all Transformers crossover movie. That would be so amazing.
I'm having to pay you a percentage of all this stuff. You're like my manager.
Veronica Taylor actually said the exact same thing to me when I first interviewed her, and I'm like, I'm just a fan. I'm just doing what I can to support the voice actors in the animation industry, which is why I do this.
So, well, thank you.
That's no problem. Now, one other role that was actually a bit of a surprise to me when I first came across it was that you did the voice of Wolverine in the Astonishing X-Men comic book. What was it like?
Wow, you did
What
your
was?
research.
I certainly did. I certainly did. What was it like playing that character, and especially stepping into the comic book world?
That was super fun. I loved Wolverine and the X-Men, so that was a super high honor, and just, again, one of those things that I had kind of a bit of a personal connection to. And Dan actually directed me in that, so that was fun. And he's a huge comic book fan, so we were treating the material with a lot of reverence and a lot of care. And it was kind of a experimental medium, I guess you could say, where it wasn't full-on animation, but it wasn't an audio drama. Like, it was like they were kind of experimenting with taking the actual panels from the comics and just putting very light movement, and just kind of, like different like camera pans and different kind of, things where like maybe the character would travel across the page. And it was, I guess the idea was that it would be slightly cheaper in terms of cost and budget than having to do full animation. And it would also be a way to kind of honor the original artists and things like that, and kind of bring new life to some of these comic books. And so they tried a few of them, and I guess it never really took off, so that they stopped doing it. But I was very excited to have done it, and that's another one that I'm pretty proud of how that one turned out, and it was very fun to do.
That's fantastic. That's absolutely wonderful. And especially that animation style, as you described it, very much reminded me of, I think, the original Watchmen comic, which basically has a similar animation style when they posted it up on. I think you can easily find it on YouTube in that sort of animation style where it's like a very movie type of
Yeah.
format for the original Watchmen comic book. And this is around the time when they dropped the Watchmen sequel series just a few years back before the pandemic. So it was a good time for everyone to catch up on the original Watchmen comic book, especially if you'd seen the original Watchmen movie by Zack Snyder years before the sequel series had taken place, which is just fantastic, actually.
Yeah.
But obviously we've got the X-Men and the Fantastic Four coming into the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and especially James Gunn being the Kevin Feige of DC Studios. What would you personally want to explore or see in both those universes, not just from an acting perspective, but from a fan perspective?
Yeah. Um, I would like for Marvel. I would love to. I'm so curious how they're going to handle the X-Men. Like, I'm so curious to see if it will be a multiverse situation where they will kind of be ported over from an existing timeline where they were around since the 60s, or if we'll see new versions of the X-Men kind of having their origins in the 2020s, and because I love in the comics how the X-Men were kind of an allegory or a parallel to some of the civil rights issues happening in the 1960s, and it'd be interesting if maybe some of these characters were being used as a way to understand some of the social issues going on now. With that would be interesting. So I'm not sure which way they'll go. But I would love to see the MCU kind of build back towards a major Endgame Infinity War type event, and I'm hoping they can get back to where there's like a really strong story that we're building towards, and we're getting to know characters from all these different things, and then they all come together again. I thought that was so special in the first half of the MCU's existence, and I'd love to see that, or something like that, happen again. And I think there's a lot of challenges to that because, of how many stories and characters that they've introduced us to, and after a while, keeping continuity for that long is going to be a challenge. So I don't know. I'd love that. And for DC, like growing up, I was more of a DC fan than a Marvel fan. And Superman is like really special to me. So I'm very excited whenever I hear James Gunn talk about his Superman film and who Superman is to him. And I think I agree with his vision of Superman, and kind of the idea that he is an idealist but he uses it to help other people, and he uses it to be generous and to try to serve. And I cannot wait to see, like, I would love to see what modern day special effects can do with that take on Superman. Like, I enjoyed Man of Steel, and I enjoyed some of the things about Zack Snyder's Superman, but I was a little, I didn't like the idea that he's kind of this burdened, you know, like, I don't want this responsibility, I don't want these powers, it's such a burden, and just, that felt so different than kind of the Richard Donner, Christopher Reeve idealistic Superman, and I'm kind of hoping for a return to kind of that version of Superman. And there were certainly things that I liked about Zack Snyder's take, but I think the idealistic kind of Boy Scout, you know, he welcomes this responsibility and kind of wants to be the light on the hill, not feeling like, oh, you know, do I want to hide from everyone who I am? You know, like, I think that's so important to who that character is, that I'm very excited to see perhaps James Gunn's take on that. And you know, anyway, rambling again. Sorry. But yeah.
No. This is fantastic. This is absolutely wonderful. I think personally, everything you just described there, you hit the nail absolutely right on the head with that regard. And I posted a couple of videos about this on my HannaTalk channel, where I posted up about my opinion on the whole of Marvel Phase 4, especially after Avengers Infinity War and Endgame, where Marvel did kind of speak about that it was always meant to be more of the experimental phase, because Endgame and Infinity War was so huge. It's like, alright, trying to go back into that momentum so quickly, we can't do that. We have to start from the beginning and slowly build our way up. Obviously, COVID did not help in that regard, which impacted on the projects at that time, but it was also because of the people under Disney at the time that in turn impacted Marvel and Star Wars with trying to work around the pandemic at that time. But I think Marvel is slowly starting to claw their way back up just a little bit, and they're getting to that point where you don't necessarily have to watch everything. If you want to skip the TV shows and just go straight for the movies, go for it. If you want to watch all of them, go for it. That was just my opinion on the whole thing anyway. And on the DC side of things, I feel like with them putting James Gunn as the Kevin Feige of DC Studios is because Warner Brothers were mostly known when it came to their standalone properties or just like doing one-off movies were a success. But when it came to trying to build out franchises in a much bigger way, similar to the MCU, that's when it was a bit of a disaster. And I feel like I know the people of Warner Brothers are going to be hearing that and just have snipers pointed at me, but no, just getting my opinion across. But I feel like by them putting them into DC into a separate studio, it's going to fix all those problems, I think, and especially putting James Gunn at the helm of it. It'll finally address a lot of the big mistakes and put DC on the track of being as equal as the Marvel movies, if not slightly higher.
Yeah. No, yeah, I agree, because, like, he's had that experience and kind of was involved and saw what Marvel did right, and then he obviously really loves these characters, so I think it could really, it has the potential to be awesome. And competition's good for everybody, because that just, like, you know, it pushes everyone to be better, and so I think it'll be good ultimately for all superhero movies.
Absolutely, and for us fans out there as well, who've been part of this for such a long time, even before the MCU even became a thing as well, where my first comic books that I ever purchased just a few years after the MCU came out was Batman, Superman, Spider-Man, X-Men, and Fantastic Four, because those were the heroes that I grew up on long before the MCU and the live-action DC movies even became a thing at that time. So, yeah, I get that as a fan, I get that as a geek as well. So, yeah, I'm excited for what they're going to bring in the future with both Marvel and DC. And who's to say you can't love both?
Oh, yeah, absolutely, I do. I do love both. I don't say that you can't love both, yeah.
Exactly. Now, obviously looking back at your entire career, where do you hope to see yourself with regards to acting and entertainment in the long run?
Well, I would like to see myself doing some live action things. I did one very, very low budget, small independent film, and I enjoyed that experience, and I would like to do that more, but I don't know how. I mean, anything can happen, but it would take a lot of it's a little harder being older and and like having to chase it. I don't know if I am gonna have the time to like really pursue it the way I would need to pursue it to make that happen. And so, but I would certainly love it, and I maybe now that my kids are moving out of the house, maybe I'll find time to pursue it in that way and give another go at that at being in some live action stuff. So that I would really enjoy that. But if not, I would love to be able to continue kind of the audiobook work I do and the animation stuff. I really enjoy this, so I'd love to do it as long as people will have me. Like I really love creating characters and telling stories, and it's something I very deeply enjoy. So
Absolutely.
love to keep doing that.
No, that sounds fantastic. And all the Stanley cameo stuff I mentioned during the interview, I'll try everything in my power to try and get that happening, because that would be fantastic.
All right. That'd be great.
Now, a bit of a funny question here, and this is going to be a bit of a head scratcher with this one. What two shows have you worked on would you want to see a crossover between, story-wise and character-wise?
Well, okay, the one that just popped in my head, it might be fun to see like Ninja Turtles and Transformers, maybe.
Oh,
like,
yes.
Like that would be kind of cool, and just to see them interacting. You mentioned earlier the secret scene at the end of the Transformers and the potential for the G.I. Joe crossover, and that would be really fun as well. Like that, just to see that happening in animation or live action would be
Absolutely. No, that would be fantastic to see that, especially because, like, I know for a fact that Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles did the whole futuristic seasons of the 2003 series, so you could think that as being like a bit of a precursor for the Transformers in a way. Or it's like that would be pretty fun to see that, and they're still writing the comic books, so anything's possible at this point. And also Transformers and Ninja Turtles are under Paramount, aka Nickelodeon,
That's right.
so
That's right.
there's a potential. There's the potential for a crossover right there.
Come on, let's make it happen.
No, that would be fantastic. And another bit of a head scratcher on this one, but looking across at the animation and the voice acting industry as a whole, what's been your opinion on where those two industries stand within the entertainment industry as a whole?
Well, I don't know. I want to be careful not to say anything too controversial, but I think I feel like it might just be kind of the taste of the day or the but I feel like sometimes there is maybe like the idea of let's cast this famous celebrity in this role, and that will help us market the film or market the cartoon or market the show. And obviously celebrities are celebrities because they are talented and they're very skilled at what they do, so it's not that they are necessarily not worthy of getting those parts or don't earn those parts. But I think sometimes the average audience member or kid is not always going to be aware that it's the name of this movie star or so and so. Some people might recognize it, but like I joke around with my wife all the time because we'll be watching, if we're watching an animated thing, I'll be like, do you know whose voice that is? And she's like, no, and she can't, or if it's a voice on a commercial, or she's like, no, I don't know, and I'm like, that's McConaughey or that, or whoever it is, and so I think, I think it sometimes can, obviously there's not one size that fits all. This is not true of all productions or all movies or all shows, but I think sometimes it takes away from the fun of character voices and really creating really interesting sounding characters, as opposed to we want this voice to be recognizable so that we can market it, and so I think and that, again, that's not always the case. There's some great shows out there that are just zany and have really interesting voices, and some of them are being done by famous actors, and that's cool too. And so I think that's maybe one concern I sometimes have. And then, but I think on the positive side, I think there seems to be we're living in a time where animation is much more widely accepted, and it's not just relegated to kids, or there seems to be a greater appreciation of animation in general, and so I think that is perhaps providing more opportunities for animation projects to happen, and people taking risks, like when you see like stuff that's happening with Across the Spider-Verse or Into the Spider-Verse, and just how visually unique that is, and how great those movies are. It's exciting because that is maybe opening the doors for more risk taking and more, and so I think that's very, very positive, and perhaps a great thing for animation in general.
No, I think that's fantastic. That's absolutely wonderful, especially looking at the idea, as you were describing about, with voice actors in a lot of animation productions, like huge Hollywood budget types of movies, where they cast these really big names to get people in the audiences. I understand that, of course. I totally understand that and everything. Whereas they have these voice actors that have been doing it for so long that could easily pull the job off just as well. And I will go on record to say, and I would say this across in any interview that I've done, and I will say this to the day I die, if people were to ask me, why do you still go to comic conventions? Why do you still do like the interviews and HannaTalk and all that kind of stuff? And I said, one, the comic conventions to meet the voice actors, and two, with this, what I'm doing now is to show my support to the animation and the voice acting industry.
Yeah, well, we appreciate it. Thank you.
That's no problem at all. And I will go on record to say that if they could manage to get Colleen O'Shaughnessy to come back as Tails in the Sonic the Hedgehog live action universe, knowing how well beloved that she is, and she's an amazing voice actress, and how much she's tied to Tails as a character in the Sonic the Hedgehog universe, then anything is possible at this point. So yeah, so let's say in like the next couple of years or something like that, if they say they want to do a live action Yu-Gi-Oh movie, for example, or even like a new animated Yu-Gi-Oh movie on a Hollywood budget, and they say, who are we going to cast for Duke Devlin? It's like Marc Thompson, because he's been so associated with the character.
Or Timothy Chalamet, you never know. Somebody put a dice on him in Photoshop.
That's fantastic though. That's absolutely wonderful. And without going into any spoilers, what's next for Marc Thompson for the fans to know about?
Well, I am trying to think of what I can say and what I can't say. I think I'm doing a lot of shows that are ending up on Netflix, so you can kind of be keeping an eye out for that. I'll most likely, I hope and pray, I get to do the Phase 3 adult novels for the High Republic and Star Wars. That would be really awesome. I haven't been sent anything yet, but I'm hoping that I'll still get to do those, and that would be really exciting to look forward to. There's a couple things I just got cast in that I don't think I'm allowed to say, so, but there are some projects I'll be working on that people will be able to check out, but I'll be probably posting on social media whenever that happens. So.
No, that's fantastic. That's absolutely wonderful. And final question, what do you think Thrawn would say if he was in Australia?
Perhaps he would say, "Good day to all my enemies. I will see you and have a shrimp on the barbie." That's probably terribly offensive. I'm sorry.
No. That's absolutely fantastic. Us Aussies, we like to make fun of ourselves, so there's no.
Okay.
So you're totally all right. That's absolutely fantastic. That is wonderful. Marc Thompson, thank you so much. It's been an absolute honor to have you back.
Thank you, Simon. I really had a lot of fun.
Absolutely. And is there anything you would like to say to the fans out there in Australia and in the world?
Oh, well, if you know who I am, thank you for listening to the things I've done, and I would love to come meet you sometime. If there's ever a show over there, I would love to come on over. So, but thank you so much. Anytime I get to meet anyone who's been a fan of the shows or the books or anything, it really inspires me, and I kind of take that encouragement with me into the booth. So you help fuel me and future performances. So I really appreciate all the kindness that people show me. So thank you very much.
That's not a problem at all, and we feel exactly the same way about you for all that you've done for not just what you currently do in Star Wars and what you currently do now, but what you've been doing for your entire career as well, bringing the characters that we've loved so much from our childhood and bringing them to life, and still means so much to us, even in like our 30s and 40s and 50s, and it will continue like that way for a long time to come. And they're starting to bring comic conventions back here in Australia. We just had Supernova this year, so
That's
I will
awesome.
do everything in my power to get you down for a comic convention next year, because that would be
I would love that.
that would be
I've
absolutely
always wanted to
fantastic.
go to Australia, so that'd be great.
Absolutely, that would be fantastic. Well, guys, if you'd like to find out more about Marc Thompson, you can check out the links which I'll put to you in the description below once this interview is officially up and running. Don't forget to like, subscribe, click that bell, check out the links, and comment below what you want me to do going forward. Thank you all so much for listening. This is Simon and Marc Thompson signing off. Bye for now.